It's time for the District 4 Report, presented to you by Professor Diggs himself, only on PowerPointBearcats.com. Class begins now.
Almost live from our studios, kind of in Pilot Point, but kind of in Parker, Texas. It is the District 4 3A Report. I am the Professor Matt Diggs. Thank you for tuning in for week 16 of the District 4 3A Report, and we are guaranteed to have either a post-mortem or a state championship review next week, so we will have run the gamut. We have made state already, and we haven't even had to win this week, but we have made it to the state championship game. Not sure everybody would agree or think that the District 4 3A Report would have made it this far, but we knew. We got special guests coming on in here in a little bit. Nolan, Ruth is going to come on, and we're going to talk all things Brock. I'll talk all things Parker County, kind of link some of the psychology of what's going on because we're going to break down the Mount Vernon game. But let's talk about what happened last week, because we went from 2-1, and the Whitesboro Bearcats against the Brock Eagles ended up being the District 4 3A championship again, and it was a fantastic football game, especially if you're a Brock fan. But I think the Whitesboro Bearcat fans can take a lot from it. And really, you look at the score, and on one hand, 49-14, you can kind of think to yourself, it could have been worse. But on the other hand, you could think to yourself, well, it could have actually been better in many ways, because Whitesboro they came out, they stopped Brock early, and then they immediately had a turnover. And if they didn't have that turnover and they could have done something with that stop, who knows, what could have happened with that game. Brock's defense was really on point in the first half. They pretty much shut Whitesboro down. Whitesboro didn't start scoring until it was 42-0 in the game. But Whitesboro had multiple opportunities to get momentum. And I always wonder if Whitesboro would have gotten any of those 3 to 4 plays in the beginning of the game, if it would have been a different game, if they would have been able to seize momentum and take care of business. They had a pick 6 that they dropped, and it just seemed over and over that Whitesboro was just a little bit off. I want to kind of equate it to how the Cowboys look sometimes. When the Cowboys look good against the Falcons and they're putting up 40, 50 points, they look real good. But when they look bad, they look real bad. And Whitesboro had not looked like this for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And give credit to Brock's defense for creating that. But there was a lot of self-inflicted damage on Whitesboro. Drop passes, missed reads, missed opportunities for the Bearcats, and Brock pretty much just dominated. But a couple of notes. We've talked about how Brock has really been averaging about 10 yards a play. One thing I noticed with Whitesboro is I think their defense gave Brock probably their toughest game of the year. Brock only averaged a little under 6 yards. And for a team that's been averaging 10 yards a play, obviously 6 is going to win you a lot of games. Let's not misconstrue that. But, I mean, this is a team that had been big offensive plays. They didn't really hit, they had a couple of 30-yard touchdowns, but I don't remember the 70 to 80-yard touchdown, and they've been hitting those home run plays quite a bit over the last few weeks. They did have a little bit of an injury issue. Cutter Wilson got hurt, and he was just having an absolute game. First quarter, 12 carries, 79 yards, had 2 touchdowns, so we were on pace for 50 carries and 320 yards and 8 touchdowns. I mean, Cutter Wilson was having himself quite a game. From all indications, he's fine. He should be playing this week against Mount Vernon, just a precaution thing. But when you've got a kid like Brett Tutter, a sophomore, who can step in, he had 100 yards against Amarillo River Road. He can just step in and easily get the ball and take care of business. You let Cutter Wilson rest, especially since Cutter was on pace for 50 yards. And I mean, for Brock, they were in 71 plays. So I mean, part of that was Whitesboro's good defense, limiting the plays, making more possessions, making Brock work for it more. But at the end of the day, Brock couldn't, hit that home run pass, so they just wore out Whitesboro. I mean, 70 plays, when you look at their previous games, I think that might be their most plays in a game this year, because they've had it to be. Eli Potts, receptions for 120 yards. Tyler Moody, another good game. But again, when you look at Tyler Moody's stats, 18 for 28, usually he's in that 80 to 90% range. And Whitesboro did a good job shutting them down and forcing quick throws. So there was a lot you can take positively out of Whitesboro. If I'm going to be one critical thing about Whitesboro, and it could be good or bad depending on how you want to look at it, I felt like in a sense, they had a mentality that they were just happy to be there. And for Brock, it was about making a statement and dominating. And I'm sure Whitesboro's message in the locker room before the game wasn't, "Hey, we're happy to be here. You know, we're let's just don't go lose by 40. Let's be happy for ourselves." But there was just a little bit of that sense of they weren't completely calm. They didn't have that same chip on their shoulder that they had the last three playoff games, where they had the talent to win the game, but they were a little bit of a underdog every single one of those three games. And this game, they were a big underdog, and they kind of played like it. But I think psychologically, it's just like, the difference between Jim Ned and Lovejoy, and I'm thinking of Lovejoy specifically, because when Lovejoy lost to South Oak Cliff this week, they thought they were going to win state. I mean, that was the big goal, and everybody says they're going to win state, but only a few teams actually have the ability to win state, and Lovejoy is one of those teams. Jim Ned was one of those teams. Brock was one of those teams. And I think it hits differently when you expect to win state and you have the talent to win state, and then you come short, as opposed to a team like Whitesboro, who wasn't expected to win state, and by any metric anywhere, they overachieved. Coach Fagan's going to get Coach of the Year votes from a lot of people because of this coaching job that they did with Whitesboro. But I just have to wonder if that came out just a little bit for Whitesboro because of the way they played and the way everything wasn't as crisp as you would expect it to be, especially the way it was the last 3 weeks. And again, a lot of that has to do with Brock's defense as well. But Whitesboro, they just really didn't figure it out until the second half, and that was kind of when Brock was a little more liberal in substituting players. They just Mac Harper did not have the kind of performance you expect from Mac Harper the last few weeks. 13 for 27, 91 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Part of that was dropped passes. Jake Hermes, 9 receptions for 119 yards, had another great day for Whitesboro and a touchdown. Just everything was just a couple yards off here, a route cut off there. Just wasn't quite there for Whitesboro. But all credit to Whitesboro. You would have not expected them to get this far, and I give them insane credit for making it this far. So congratulations to Whitesboro. I know we will see them next year, and if they're not in your top 10 to start out with, wherever they get redistricted, I think you're not paying attention to football. Whitesboro is going to be back next year, and it's going to be better next year. Brock's got a lot to say about that as well. We don't know how the realignments are going to work, if they're going to be in same districts or different districts. We've seen Brock go west. They've gone east out here at the DFW, and that'll definitely be something over the next couple of weeks as we get that realignment number that we can talk about maybe in a little more detail here on the District 4 3A report. But coming up next, we're going to have our first special guest and our only special guest of the evening. Nolan Ruth is going to come talk Parker County football with us, and then on the other side of that, we'll talk a little bit about Mount Vernon and Brock. So stay tuned to the District 4 3A report. We are here in the District 4 3A report with the godfather of Parker County, the man who one time sacked Jarrett Stidham. It's true. You can look it up on the record books. And a purveyor of truth and justice in the Parker County community. Nolan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing all right, man. Thanks for bringing up the Jarrett Stidham thing. It's something I always love going back to.
It is a great, it may be on your gravestone, but hopefully we put some new memories on your gravestone before that's the number one thing up there. But, we'll talk a lot about Mount Vernon, and people have their opinions on that. I think most people have Brock as a heavy favorite, but you are somebody who is surrounded by state championships. In fact, there's 10 in just in the city where you cover. When you look at Brock, what characteristics of a state championship team do you see when you see this team?
Well, that's probably the best question you've ever asked me. I would have to say just the tenacity, the never die attitude. I've seen it multiple times, and not even just this season within Brock. Just that attitude that they expect to win. And they're going to work harder than anybody else that's in their district, in their county, whatever have you. That's the characteristic of someone who can be a state champion, and like you just mentioned, I'm surrounded by it. I've won one myself. I see that within Brock, and to be completely honest, I got to give that up to their coaching staff and Coach Billy Mathis. And he's an Alito grad. He came here. He was actually my position coach for a little bit. Actually, when I sacked Jarrett Stidham that one time, but no, that was it. They just have that same kind of mentality that you see in Alito, and not even just Alito, but you see it in Austin Westlake now, and South Lake Carroll. They know how good they are. They expect to win, and they're going to work to win. As we kind of saw today, but not for real. You don't want to irritate them, because if you aggravate them, like Jim Ned saw, when you anger Brock, you're going to remember it.
Yeah, with the District 4-3A report, one thing I saw this past week was a lot of different teams. I saw some people from Peaster. I saw some people from Pilot Point. A lot of people came out and wanted to see who was going to kind of go on. And I think we're going to see a lot of District 4-3A support going forward in Brock and supporting them. But one thing I'm curious about, if you know this or you might have some ideas, not all friendships are created equal. And what I mean by that is when Allen does well, you would think Collin County would get around them and kind of, rally up around them. But the Plano folks, they want nothing to do with Allen. But the Lovejoy people, they'll come in and they'll support Allen. Is Parker County completely behind Brock, or are there some people like, I don't know about all that with Brock?
I'll tell you who's not behind it, and that is the people of Peaster. Those two schools just hate each other. I mean, in any sport. And obviously Peaster's football program being new, that isn't much of a football rivalry right now as much as it is in every other sport. But yeah, the people of Peaster are going to be big Mount Vernon fans this week. But the mood is everywhere else. I mean, I know that Coach Jake Johnson at Millsap and all the people out there, they're supporting Brock right now. A lot of people in Weatherford are hoping Brock win. The people of Weatherford kind of piggyback off of whoever's doing well in any sport. They're kind of like how I am, right? It's Parker County. This is our county. And then Alito the same way. Obviously their season ended a little prematurely this year. That then ended earlier than they would have liked. But like I brought up, Billy Mathis is an Alito grad. He was a coach at Alito for a long time. So was Blake Christensen, their offensive coordinator. He's also an Alito grad. He was part of the first ever state championship team in 1998. People in Alito are absolutely getting behind this Brock team because of that connection. Springtown, I have no read on, but it seems to me that everyone in Parker County that kind of straddles I-20 right there, everyone pretty much except Peaster is all behind Brock.
One thing you mentioned, you kind of alluded to, and I understood what you're saying, but our good friends at the District 4-3A report may not understand what you're saying. And I don't want to ask you necessarily about that, but it's kind of that genre that you said you don't want to get Brock mad. And one thing I noticed this year is, it's been widely talked about. If you go to the Brock football Twitter, they've got a quote from Matt Stepp on there that he thought they would be down a little bit, and people talked about that internally as kind of a motivation thing. And then Whitesboro, they felt disrespected, and Jim Ned, they felt disrespected. Do you think it's good for them to kind of feed on this negativity with a chip on their shoulder, or do you think that a team should just ignore that? Because Alito doesn't seem to really focus on those kinds of external things, because people are always talking bad about Alito, and I might be one of the biggest ones in doing that, but they don't seem to really care about that kind of stuff. Does that worry you that they kind of need that external kick to create a chip on their shoulder?
That's actually a really good question, and I'm glad you brought that up because I'll tell you right now, you may not see it externally from Alito, but I can tell you from my experience. I had a teammate, his name was Jacob Holshoe, and he came in one day after our varsity had lost one game, and he just wrote this big long speech on the whiteboard in the locker room, and it went all over Twitter, and it fired our team up. And I think that one was my sophomore year when we beat Temple for the state championship. Look, it's there. I mean, whether you see it or not, it's there. But I will say, as much as I love Billy Mathis, like that is absolutely a classic Billy Mathis move right there. He would love to just pin up a message or a tweet from someone saying, "This is what they think of you guys. Go prove them wrong." I got to catch a little bit of his pregame speech earlier this week against Whitesboro, and he was saying exactly what you just said, that he thought. That Brock didn't have necessarily a good game the first time against Whitesboro, that Whitesboro kind of ended up beating themselves. And if you go back and look at what happened in that game, he had a point. Brock kind of shot themselves in the foot every now and then, and they were fortunate enough to clean most of that up in the second half and pull away with a 42-21 win. And he made it very loud and clear. You make sure that this time they know that the Brock Eagles beat them. So I know that Billy Mathis absolutely loves that kind of thing. He loves getting that little extra motivator, because it's not all just work in the weight room and on the field as much as coaches say that it is. You got to want it, and you got to have that extra motivator. You got to be able to want to prove someone wrong. So yeah, with that being said, trust me, you may not see it. It's there in Alito. It's there in Brock. They feed off of people telling them that they are down, that they're not going to do well this year. And it just makes them hungrier and hungrier.
It's the District 4-3A report. I'm with Nolan, Ruth, the Parker County Godfather. All things Alito, all things Parker County. You've done such a great job. I just want to kind of give you the microphone for however long you want it, and just you can give your prediction on this game and just kind of things you might be looking for. Because I think most people are going to pick Brock to win this game between big and really big. But, what kind of things might you be looking for a state championship run, like the kind of things you're going to be looking for when you look at this game?
Well, honestly, I'd have to say that Brock has got to be the clear-cut favorite. Obviously, we thought that the winner of the Jim Ned Brock game is going to be the favorite. Honestly, this Mount Vernon team is probably the toughest team Brock has seen all year, and that includes Jim Ned, I would think. However, just seeing this team and the way the defense swarms to the ball and the way the offense just seems to make things happen. They lost Cutter Wilson in the first quarter of this past game. Nothing serious. They just kept him out for precaution. And they had a sophomore running back, Tutter, that just came in and just totally tore it up. And he's only a sophomore. They just seem to get things done.
Absolutely.
That's what you're going to be able to look forward to this time. I don't know a lot about Mount Vernon myself, other than the fact that, Art Briles was the coach last year and he left for, I don't know what reason, but that's the extent of what I know for Mount Vernon. I know this is their second time in the semifinals in the past 2 years. But in all honesty, there's, things are different out here in Parker County. These kids just expect to win. And I think they're going to go out there and do that. They're going to expect to win. They're going to know what they have to do to get the job done. And that's what they're going to do. And I think you're going to see that, in my personal opinion and my prediction, you're going to see that the next 2 weeks. And I think in 2 weeks, we're going to see the Brock Eagles come back to Parker County with the state championship. On top of that, I would like to add that I do have a lot of love and respect for District 4-3A. My brothers are Pilot Point Bearcats. I've seen this district quite a lot over the past few years. I love the fact that Peaster, the Parker County team to cover, as well as Brock. And I thank you for having me on the show. And I hope that people listening enjoy having me talk to them about it, because I would sure love to come back and do this again next year. So much love to everyone in District 4-3A.
I tell you, the Pilot Point Bearcat Broadcasting Network, every time you come on, the ratings go through the roof. So we appreciate that. And I don't want to end quite yet. I just want to just quickly make the point because you made a point, and I don't want to forget the point about how Art Briles was the coach last year, and Brock's got a new coach as well. So you got two teams in the state semifinals with brand new coaches, both trying to prove themselves against a legend in their community. I have to think that might be a storyline that we're not talking as much about. Perhaps the Mount Vernon side is thinking the same thing, like, hey, Art Briles was a great coach, but we can do this now too. So I think that might be something to keep an eye on as well.
Well, I don't know how many more times I can kiss the butt of Billy Mathis before this show ends, but I mean, I can do it if I have to. Look, he's a great coach, and I have the utmost respect for him. He is obviously coached under both Tim Buchanan and Steve Wood at Aledo. He obviously has established his coaching style. He didn't get exactly the results he wanted at Weatherford. I know he would have something more there. But when he came and took this job, he knew very well that he had the coaching prestige, and he knew that he had what it takes to win a state championship and to lead a team into the state championship and this far. He's never done it as a head coach, but he did it as a defensive coordinator for Aledo multiple times. I think he's got this big game experience that, if he comes in with the mentality of, I've done this before, I know how to coach these guys, takes, Brock's going to have no problem rolling to the state championship, and Blake Christensen, the offensive coordinator, is the same way. And so they obviously have a lot to prove, with Mathis being the head coach now, and instead of a defensive coordinator, he's got something to prove, but I think he's got everything he needs right in that tool belt. And that's why I give Brock the edge more than anything else. We can talk about the defensive play. We can talk about how the offense just gets things done. But the bottom line is they have a head coach who should have been head coaching a long time ago. He's had that tool belt since I was in high school, and he was my defensive coordinator. He's just that good. He's that kind of coach, and I think that is what's going to make the difference. I don't think it even compares. Billy Mathis knows this stage, and he knows what it takes to win here, and he's going to win it.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining us on the District 4-3A report. You can go follow him on Twitter if you want more of this kind of insight at Real Nolan Ruth. Thank you again for helping to pop the ratings on the District 4-3A report. I know our friends in Pilot Point appreciate it as well.
Hey, man, thanks for having me back on. I'll talk to you this time next week previewing a Brock State Championship game. I guarantee it.
What a blessing it is for the District 4-3A report to have somebody like Nolan, and what a blessing it is for the District 4-3A report to have our friends in Pilot Point who make me sound like $1 million. So thank you to all of our hard-working people in Pilot Point, tweaking and turning those knobs in the Pilot Point studios. We appreciate it, making all of us look good, including Nolan. And boy, I still giggle about that Ric Flair drop a couple of weeks ago. I mean, these people do a great job. But let's talk a little bit about the actual game this week in District 4-3A instead of all the pomp and circumstance surrounding Parker County and the game and what happened last week. Let's talk a little bit about Mount Vernon. And before we really get into Mount Vernon, I wanted to talk to you a little bit, and I talked about this last week, what I saw in West. And West is a team that had a really good defense and a so-so offense. And they won that game 14-12 against Malakoff, stopped a 2-point conversion. West was very big in the trenches. West very fast in the secondary. Really swarmed to the ball and did a good job of shutting down the running game. And I think it's important to mention that because Mount Vernon has really been coming from that Art Briles mentality, an offensive first team. I mean, when you look at their scores this year, I mean, they've put up 63, 38, 42, 56, 63, 49, 56, 41, 37, 56, 57, 57, and 40 before last week. So, I mean, I haven't done the math. If I had if I were a well-prepared person, I'd already have the numbers done. But they're probably averaging 47 to 50 points a game. I mean, when you look at all that, West shoved them down to 24 points, and that's not too unexpected given that West had a really good defense, and West was a team that shut Malakoff down, and they had played fantastic defense all year. In fact, when you look at who West was throughout the year, they had held teams. Rogers had a 28-point game. Grandview scored 20 against them, but otherwise everybody else was scoring 0 or 15 or under. And West really hung their hat on that defensive side of the ball. So the fact that Mount Vernon could score 24 points against West, I think says something about their kind of offense. And I think Brock's defense is not going to be quite as good as West and what they're going to be bringing out. So I think there's a little bit of a concern. If you remember 2019, after Brock had that big win against Pilot Point, they played Pottsboro. Pottsboro, kind of known for that offensive style of the football, got into a one-score game and won it late. So I think Mount Vernon certainly has a chance because offensively they play really good football. And when you look at kind of the big players for Mount Vernon, you can look at their quarterback, Braden Bennett, the junior, and this is a kid who has thrown for almost 3,500 yards this year. I mean, just 3,528, has thrown only 7 interceptions, does not make a lot of mistakes, 40 touchdowns, so over 14 games, averaging 3 touchdowns a game. Just a very good quarterback and has led them well. And then rushing the ball, Mackenzie McGill has had quite the year, but when you look at how West shut him down, he only carried 21 for 75, probably one of his least offensive outputs of the year, given the fact that he has carried 270 times for 2,100 yards this year over his 14 games and 36 touchdowns on his own as well. And then receiving the ball out of the backfield, not a big threat, but they'll throw it to him a few times a game, averages 2 receptions a game, 430 yards and 5 touchdowns, so not quite their first option in the throwing the ball. But again, it shows you that a good defense can shut that down. And Brock has the ability to play. Again, I don't think Brock is as good as West is defensively, but if they can shut the running game down, and if their secondary can play that one-on-one coverage, which is kind of how they played Whitesboro, I think they have a really good chance to dominate that game just because of the matchups. And then you look at the receiving side of the game. Caden Kaufman, the senior, has been big for Mount Vernon against West. He had 5 receptions for 95 yards, and he's had quite the year for Mount Vernon throughout the year. He's their leading receiver, 24 touchdowns, averages about 100 yards a game, 75 receptions for 1,576 yards, 21 yards every time he touches the ball for Mount Vernon. So obviously Brock is going to probably bracket him, try to stop the run, and if they can't do that, if they have to remove that bracket away from them, maybe Kaufman might be the difference and get out on some one-on-one coverage, bust some routes, and dominate against the Brock secondary. But Pottsboro had that same thought, and they weren't able to do that. Brock wasn't able to get Whitesboro wasn't able to get the running game going. Once they weren't able to get the running game going, then they didn't have to bring extra help. They could just play coverage and just let their front 7, front 6 at times, depending on the packages that Whitesboro would use to stop that run. And that really speaks well, again, to Brock's defensive prowess. If they can do that against Mount Vernon, I think it's going to be a long night. But if Mount Vernon can get that running game going to where we're going to have to get 7 in the box and have some one-on-one battles, maybe just a one high safety look to to deal with Mount Vernon's secondary, Mount Vernon's receiver core, then all of a sudden you might be able to see Mount Vernon have some sustained drives because, again, Brock is not known for, they're not a shutdown defense. They're a good defense. They're a gritty defense. They're a well-coached defense, but they're not West. I mean, West had one of the best defenses in 3A this year, consistently against anybody they played. So when I look at that, I think Mount Vernon looks very much like Whitesboro in many ways. So subsequently, I think Brock has the opportunity, if they play well, to have that same kind of 35-point victory that they had against Pottsboro. But if you remember when we talked about it in the first segment, Pottsboro with a couple of overthrows here and there, a pick six missed, if they would have converted all of those plays, I think it could have been a different game. It could have looked much like the first game where it was 21-21 going into halftime against Whitesboro, and then Brock figured it out in the second half. I could see Mount Vernon, if they make those plays, if the stage isn't too big for them, and McKinney, maybe it is 21-21 at halftime. And then can they make the defensive adjustments to battle Brock? I think that's going to be their formula for the win. But seeing what I saw with Brock and their front seven and their ability to cover the edges, I think they're going to be able to stop that running game, force them to have to make perfect throws into double coverage at times with well-designed zone schemes. I think they're not going to be able to handle that. It's going to be the first time where they're very much like with West. If you look at what if you look at what Mount Vernon's going to have to do, I think they're going to have to score 42 points in this game to win that game. And they only got 24 against West. I can't see him getting up to 42 without turnovers and some other shenanigans. So I think Brock will win this game handily. I think I'll pick them by at least 3 scores, but you can tune into the old coach Thursday at 10 a.m. when I post my projections officially on the website. But I know I will be taking Brock in this game. So the only question left will be, will the District 4 3A report next week be previewing a state championship? Nolan did guarantee it. That's big words. Or will we be saying goodbye to you as the audience? I think we'll be back for a couple more weeks at the very least. So think a good thought for the Brock Eagles this week. So for everybody in the District 4 3A metaverse, I don't know if that's trademarked quite yet by somebody, but I'm not trying to make money on it. So I think I can say that. If I can't, that's what our people in Pilot Point, they can put a little sensor on there. And then you'll have to wonder what I said in front of the word verse, like the metaverse, the universe. Who knows what I said? So for Nolan and all of our friends in District 4 3A and even Peaster, I disagree with Nolan a little bit. I think Peaster, they may not like Brock, but I think they like District 4 3A, and I don't know that they'll all be cheering for Mount Vernon. I think there's a little bit of silent respect between Brock and Peaster, so we'll give Peaster a shout out as well. I think they're on the 4 3A train, and if they're not, I'm sure they'll let us know. We will see you next week for perhaps state championship previews here on the District 4 3A Report.